Evening, class. All right. Oh, mics are now on. Good evening, everyone. We will get started, starting off with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if everyone can stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Starting off with rules for public comments. Again, not many folks in the back. If Ellen wants to talk, she can. But we just ask to keep any public comments at 3 minutes or less. Make sure it is in regards to this budgeting process. If you have any other comments to make that goes against that process, feel free to contact either myself, or you could also talk to Clay as far as the proper venue for that public comment, because we are always happy to hear any and every thought that you have. Going on to ground rules, very much the same as public comment, right? So just ask that everyone be respectful, to keep comments associated to the budgeting process. If there's anything that you would like to make a comment on, a thought, a question that you have that does kind of go off the rails, we do have a parking lot, or also feel free to send an email to Todd, myself, so we can find the best time for that to be brought up in future meetings. As we talked about last time, we just ask that you keep your cell phones off or on quiet. If you do need to take a call at any point because family needs you, we just ask that you step out into the hallway. Otherwise, we do want you to be present so that you can contribute. That all being said, is there any public comment? I look towards the bleachers first. No, nothing? All right. Anyone in the committee that would like to make a public comment prior to us starting?
Oh, just one note, Eric and I did, we were working with the Dawn and the office, for those of you who got the data, this in PowerPoint, cases that we will try to make sure it gets sent out in a PDF version going forward, just, but if you did need it, by the way, both Eric and I can convert it, so you can always just ask us, like some of you did. We have no problem if something gets sent out that's in a format that you're having an issue. As I just had fun with Mr. Burns, it took me a second, but with the thanks of Taylor, I figured out how to copy and paste the article in the Portland Press Herald today on PFAS and send it to Clay and Dawn, so in case it comes up. But the reality is that there's always a way. Just might take us a little bit of a hiccup.
So you're recorded saying that you were pirating from the Press Herald.
I pay for my subscription, but why they won't let me to convert to PDF, I don't know. But Eric was trying to explain to me, but I just was,
So next item on the agenda, the draft minutes from last time. Does anyone had a chance to look through them or has any revision? Now would be a great time. Seeing none, do I see a motion?
To accept them as written.
See, and then Peter second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Next agenda item, starting off with academic data. And Lori, there's a lot to cover tonight, so one thing I would ask is if we can hold questions for moments that Lori, maybe if you can ask and find time, when would be a good question time? Because I do know there's some pretty hefty stuff that we're going through tonight. Izzy?
I need a glossary of terms.
Okay.
For the
same thing.
in medicine, we're awful at using acronyms, and this is like that, and I have no idea, but thank you.
A
Explain
good
it as you go,
request, yes. So
please.
as we're going through, if there are any initialisms or acronyms, if we could maybe spell those out
I
so
will.
that we can understand.
And I can also, for the minutes, put a little glossary together. Oh,
Awesome.
my green. Thank you.
All right, how do I present?
We'll get to the detail, but some of it is going to be for the purpose of this, like F&P. It stands for something, but it's a reading measure, and that's probably the big takeaway to know. And knowing that it means Fontes and Pinnell, who are the people who created it and published it, is less important than knowing it's a reading measure, right? And that's the kind of stuff we'll try to make sure we're clear on as we go.
There's no quiz at the end of this.
Right.
All right.
Oh, I'm in presenter view. I don't know how to get out of that, but this will work. All right. So if anybody didn't hear when I came in, I was whining because I went home for a few minutes and I went out and brushed my teeth and brushed my hair and I left my glasses on the bathroom counter. So I have these like readers from the bottom of my purse. So I'll probably be back and forth. This will be, I feel a little bad for some folks that have heard the some of the same stuff for 3 years, but I do want to take a minute to just talk about what we do and explain some things. For those of you who are on the board or who watched the board presentation that the curriculum department did 3 weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, maybe it's been a month, a lot of the data is obviously the same. So this is, so some of that might be review for some of you who watched the board presentation on data. I'm going to start with literacy data, and I just want to remind folks that in the elementary grades, K to 5, we use a flex literacy model, which means that we gather all kinds of measures, which you're going to see, and we group students according to what their immediate needs are for literacy development. There's a lot of components to literacy. It's not just a matter of vocabulary and comprehension. We know that there's a lot of brain development that goes on, that there are, that phonetics plays a role, orthographics plays a role, and I'm going to and any literacy questions you have, I'm going to shoot to Molly because she would know a lot more than I would. She's lived elementary land for a long time. But one of the things about the flex model is that it allows us to group students according to their immediate priority needs or their reading ability. And then that's flexible. So every 8 weeks or so, we're collecting data and then reshuffling them, and they might move to a different group. Or, oh, we know that this group is really struggling, so we may, so we're going to focus particularly on comprehension with these 5 kids when they have their instruction. And that little slide up there kind of shows a picture of what a literacy classroom looks like. You'll see during reading, they might have a little story at the beginning or some instruction sitting on the carpet with the teacher, but then they're broken into groups, and in an ideal situation, you'll have 2 or 3 adults in the room, and those adults are rotating those kids around centers and in those small flex groups that are based on their needs. And then the nice thing is you cross classrooms, so one teacher doesn't have 5 different reading levels in the room. They can focus on just a couple of levels because the kids kind of go across the hall or next door to get their instruction in these flexible groups. So I just want to explain that because we collect a lot of data in these flex groups, and our elementary teachers in particular have had a lot of training on, we have data walls. We have these big fancy spreadsheets of data on every student, and we collect data 3 or 4 times a year, and we have benchmarks developed for each piece of the year. So this is where all those acronyms comes from, the kinds of testing we do. So everything from in kindergarten, you can see that we are measuring, how many letter sounds do they have in October? How many letter sounds do they have in January? How many letter sounds do they know in May, and so on. Fluency, high frequency words. For example, in kindergarten, by a certain point in the year, they need to have 120 high frequency words, or whatever that number is. Words Their Way is more of spelling and writing. Fontes and Pinnell is a comprehension and just overall literacy measure. And the NWA, as you know, is the MAP growth system, which does comprehension, not fluency, right? There's two tests.
Brain picture that you have, like
Yeah.
it does phonics, fluency,
Right.
phonics, comprehension,
Yep.
and how they understand how words work.
Right. And then, and it's interesting, but as kids get older, right? So by 2nd grade, we're not testing letter ID and letter sounds and fluency and high frequency words in the whole population because students hopefully, have most of those somewhere along the way in kindergarten or 1st grade. And the other thing that's important, and especially in early literacy in those first 2 or 3 years, is you have to remember that the variety, the kids are in all different places, right? We have students who come into kindergarten who don't even have any letter sounds or even know recognized letters, and then you have kids who come into kindergarten who already know how to read. So so it's so there's a lot a lot of varied instruction happening. So this is an example of what a benchmark wall looks like. So these might be the numbers that we're using to determine where kids fall. And so and this is a grade 1 chart just for an example, and so you can see in the fall, and there's percentiles for the NWEA at the bottom, but you can see that we consider a student who's got less than 75 high-frequency words in the fall of first grade would be far below, and students who know 250 or more high-frequency words at the beginning of first grade are well above the expected benchmark. In all of our charts, you'll kind of see the color coding: blue, green, yellow, orange, red. Yellow and higher are on grade level. I'll put in quotes because it really is more of a continuum. But that is kids are doing well or are on track with most of their peers according to the normed benchmarks if they're yellow and up. And so if you don't remember, like, what's an F&P, what's an NWEA, what's a WTW or whatever, that's okay, because those are just acronyms for all the different kinds of tests we do. Another thing before we get into the data that I just want to take a minute to explain, and again, I know this is redundant for those of you who've done this before, there's different kinds of assessments. Some of the assessments that our kids are given are norm referenced. Norm reference, not normed reference, and which means that, like, for example, the NWA MAP test, all the kids in the country, thousands and thousands of students take the NWA. It's a very common assessment for literacy and math. They look at all the students around the country that are at that age and at that level, and they say this is kind of what this is where most kids score, and they create a bell curve. So when we talk about norm reference tests like the NWEA, kids are being compared to other age grade alike peers in the country. So if they determine that most of the kids in the country, score 222 at this grade level, then that would be like the benchmark, and that's where you decide, and that's where people decide, is that kid above or below the benchmark. Where when we get to the science test, for example, that's a criterion reference test, which means it's not based on how kids do around the country or even around the state of Maine. A bunch of professionals who made the test, whether it's, experts, get together and write the test, and they decide this is where everybody in the 3rd grade should be. This is where everybody in the 8th grade should be. So when you see data, you'll see data that you're like, oh my gosh, everyone in the whole state of Maine is below in science or whatever the subject is, and I can't believe that only 40% of our students in the state of Maine are on level for science. That doesn't mean compared to the rest of the country or compared to other kids that are at the same place. That means according to the line that was drawn by the people who made the test. And then just the opposite with norm reference tests. So I wanted to just make sure that you kind of have that picture when you look at data. The other thing is achievement versus growth, right? The federal government requires that the state of Maine measures and publishes student achievement. We spend a lot of time, and as educators, focused on growth. Achievement is very important too, don't get me wrong. But we look at growth because when you have a kiddo who comes into 1st grade and he's in the red and he's way behind, he or she or they, right? They might have an amazing year and grow like 3 times more than they expected for a year. But they're still in the red and orange. So according to the state, they still are not meeting the standard, even though they've grown 3 times more than expected that year because they had a lot of catch-up growth and they did really well. So that student just grew leaps and bounds and went from, say, being, oversimplifying it, went from being a non-reader to a reader, but because they didn't quite make that benchmark for their age, they're still considered below standard because their achievement wasn't there, because they didn't meet the line for achievement. So we look a lot at growth. We want to make sure kids are growing. Especially, and we look at, when you look at growth a lot too, is like we've had a lot of conversations around kids at the top of the bell curve. Because we have students who might go into 5th or 6th grade and they've already kind of They're already at the top of the test. As a matter of fact, the reason we stopped giving the NEWA after 10th grade is because it's not even normed for kids older than that. Kids and some of our high flyers max out the NEWA when they're in like 7th grade. So we spend a lot of time looking at growth because we want those kids to continue growing and not just stay level. And so we have to look at other ways to measure them. Anyway, so that's my little lecture on data. So how do we do in literacy? So this is just a snapshot, but, you know, and you could look at all, and it's not that we're hiding anything, but we just took a picture of 5th grade. 5th grade's a good benchmark year before kids go to middle school. Where are they at? So this is actually the same students over the last 5 years. So you can see in 23, 24 where they fell somewhere just under, you know, around 70%. And you can see in 1920 they were way above. Their proficiency was in the like almost 90th percentile, and then in the pandemic dropped way down, the pandemic year when we were hybrid, and then they've slowly recovered. So this is a picture of a proficiency trend for 5th grade. Same kids. Okay, so this was, sorry, let me go back. So this is the Fontes and Pinnell for their proficiency. This is the same kids and their growth over time. So remember, we looked at achievement. Where are they at? Now you can see where the same 5th grade group over the years has been with growth. And you can also see there's a missing one because we didn't test during when we were shut down. So you can see, for example, where they ended the year last year from winter to spring, there's only, you know, like about, I know this, the chart should have more grid lines on it. About 78% of the 5th graders were meeting what we expect for typical growth in that year. But the year before, they did not grow as much as we expected. Questions so far? Now this compares them last year to this year for all the grades. So you can see kindergarten all the way through 10th grade, and the last year's 10th graders showing what they did in their 11th grade box. So the 2023 are the black bars, and 2024 is green. So so it's comparing the same students last year to this year. And you can see, for example, 10th grade, and 10th grade is a tough one, I'll tell you. It is really hard to get, so they did pretty well in 9th grade, right? They were, looks like they had about 73% of the students were at benchmark for reading when they were in 9th grade. Those same kids in 10th grade dropped way down to only about 40%. So that's the same kids. They didn't get less smart from 9th grade to 10th grade. Their achievement dropped for 2 reasons. One, the benchmark obviously keeps going up, and they may not be keeping up with pace. But probably the bigger piece that is hard to measure, but a really big deal in 10th grade, is how seriously they take the test. Okay, because by 10th grade, it is really hard to get them to take the NEWA seriously because they've taken it 3 times a year since 1st grade. And it means nothing to them, right? Doesn't go on your college application, doesn't have any meaning.
Question
yes.
from Peter.
Are all the students taking this test, or can they opt out of taking the test, and that also skews the data?
So they do opt out. Some do opt out. A few. Let me start with this. There is paperwork a parent can do, and they can say, I don't want my kid to take any standardized tests. We had a thing like a decade ago where that was popular. Has not been a thing lately. Most people, their kids take the assessment. We are required to, in order to meet the expectation with the DOE, we have to test 95% of the students in each grade. And that includes students with IEPs, students who don't speak English, students who are, in special circumstances, students who aren't coming to school, students who are in outplacements and in other buildings, and even homeschoolers homeschoolers have the option to opt into the testing if they want to. They can come take it. So So the answer is most kids take the test. We struggle in the high school in particular. We struggle to get 95%. Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak on that as being in the high school currently. A lot of kids skip that day. I know we're split into sync groups, and that's where we take these tests. And on days that we're testing, it's the past couple years have been a half day, so then it's just a test and then we go home. I think my sync had 3 people in it when we were testing out of our 10-person class, and people just don't care because it's either how fast can I take this without them stopping me or anything, because they realize it doesn't apply to colleges and the school just needs it for data, and it's not changing our curriculum because we choose our classes at that point. So a lot of people don't take it seriously, and the following 2 weeks, teachers get emails throughout the day to call students out of class to go take the test. So people are tracked down to take it. So eventually they do find the kids that don't, and they make them take the test. They don't take it seriously, but they do sit down and click the button over and over. So, and I am pretty high in my class, and I also did not take it seriously because it takes like an hour and a half, 2 hours if I want to take it seriously. And I have a car in the parking lot, and I'm able to leave after I'm done. So, and this was sophomore year. I haven't taken it this year.
No, we stop after
so.
sophomores.
Yeah.
And they used to make 11th graders be the benchmark year, but the test is really not designed for 11th graders. And I think you should be way over it by the time you're in 10th grade. But I think that what's important is what you want to see, if you took 10th grade out of the picture, what you want to see is you want to see green a little higher than black, right? You want kids achieving more than they did the year before. So when you look at that 9th grade one, right, you would want them to have a little more than they had when they were in 8th grade, and so on, because black is how they did the year before. Go back, yes.
Yeah, just another note, and Molly, jump in if I'm wrong, but sometimes what you see from kindergarten in the lower end too is that it gets a little bit harder, like the instruction gets a little bit harder, what they're being, like the test changes in there somewhere around second grade.
Second grade, yeah.
The test will read to the kids, so they have more cues to work off from, and then they're expected, by second grade, they're expected to read the test on their own, so you'll see usually a dip around that time. It's not unusual to see less kids showing as less proficient until they figure out how to take the new version of the test, and then you hope to see that growth pick back up, and I kind of feel like this graph sort of shows that trend.
So there's a K2 version of the MAP test and then a 2-5. So in second grade, there's actually 2 different tests depending on that kid's ability.
And also, I believe this year is the year we started Main Through the Year, which is through the NEOA platform, but again, a slightly different test for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students. So that affected scores slightly there as well.
And I know I didn't read the caption out loud, but just to make sure everyone knows too, like the goal is 60%. So where we are like, is when students aren't meeting that 60% benchmark. So if you drew the line at 60, just above the 50, you'd be like, that's the place. So some years students did well, some grades students did well above the benchmark, and some grades didn't.
Izzy? Yeah.
So, to go off of Hannah's remark, these tests are state mandated.
Yes. The main through year is, yes, twice a year.
Okay.
We give it to most students in the elementary grade and some students in middle and high in the winter as a measure for growth too.
And, okay, so you're trying, the kids figure it has no effect on their curriculum. It has no effect on their college, it's not an SAT or any of that stuff. Is there any way to incentivize?
I've seen all kinds of things.
And is there a point to it?
Yeah.
I mean, you make some good points.
I think you made really good points, but I think you also have to remember, most kids want to do well. And most students are pretty darn compliant. They may not show up that day, but when you grab them for the makeup, they take it seriously and they do it. I think it's just a matter of right? I think it all comes down to the culture you're building and how much are you, you know, what kind of message are your teachers sending about it? Is it really talked about how important this is? Are you prepping the kids ahead of time? Are you, you know, as opposed to, okay, guys, we got to do the new, you know, and I think that, I think we do a good job. I think most of the kids do take it seriously. I think, you know, it's hard to get a 16-year-old to take anything seriously, but like that is, I think we do a good job, and most of the elementary schools don't have trouble getting their 95%. Honestly, we're mostly chasing truant students who have really sporadic chronic absenteeism, students who are in the hospital, students who are in and out placement. Like those are the ones we have to scrounge to try to get to 95%.
I mean, I can totally get Hannah's point of view and why she didn't take it seriously, because it's not formative. It's not going to help her with her career. It's not providing her really anything. I mean, so is there, and the frustrating part of this, bringing it back to the budget, it seems that there's a lot of effort put into tracking all this down and then, you know, making sure that they do take it. And so, you know, from an incentive side, like, come, if 100% of your group comes, like, we'll give you blah, right? But it's.
Yeah, there's some of that goes on, absolutely.
Yeah, but you know, but from also this data standpoint, like from what I'm hearing, we should even be looking at 10th and 11th grade, you know, so, but based off of that, what is the data that we should be looking at across the district to provide us with better numbers?
Yeah, I can show you some of that later.
Yeah.
But I think just looking at this one chart, I would tell you the conversations we had when it came to literacy, we were a little bit concerned about 6th grade.
Yeah.
Especially the kids at the top of the bubble. The greens and the blues did not grow. And so like, okay, are we not challenging them enough? Are we not pushing, you know? And so those are the kinds of conversations that we have in those data meetings and in PLG groups. And, you know, this is the stuff that teachers spend their early dismissal time on some months. Not all of them. Okay. Yes, before I go to math.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, is there anything, this is all information from the students. Is there any input from the teachers on their development or anything?
Absolutely, that comes on the report card, right?
Okay.
So this is just testing as to like how we do compared to the rest of the state, how do our kids do compared to the rest of the country. That's these standardized measures are what I'm mostly presenting on tonight. Kids' individual grades, they still get grades, they still get report cards or report of progress, we call them in elementary school, right? And so that teachers have a lot of input into student data, and honestly, students take that seriously. They know that matters and that counts, right?
That's what it was. You had mentioned the data on the data wall, and this kind of goes along with your question. I'm sorry.
You want me to go back to that?
Mary Lou. But we meet 3 times a year with the teachers of each grade level and discuss the wall and where students fall. We discuss like individual students and what we can do to help move them forward and keep moving. And like Lori had said about the growth, those students that are in that red section and kind of in the far below, they do have to play catch up and work harder than a lot of their peers to kind of meet that. And so we come up with numerous different ways and plans and strategies for all of the students.
Because we do need to get to math, but I just want to add one more point that our district is very student-focused, individualized instruction, whereas some districts use programs that are more focused on the curriculum and not the student, right? And there's benefits, I suppose, to both, but it's a lot of work for our teachers, but I think it benefits the students more when the teacher's looking at what each student needs rather than teaching out of a kit where everybody gets the same thing. So I just think it's worth noting.
And the other piece, too, that I think is really important to note is that reading instruction is far more than close reading with your teacher going through a book, you know, through those leveled reader books, right? You will see movement. You will see kids running ladders and doing little courses in the hallway. You will see teachers doing eye tracking with the really little kids because learning how to follow a figure 8 with a pen and using eye tracking is a really important component to learning to read. And following your finger from left to right. And we know that cross-body movements activate the areas of the brain for learning to read. And so, like, you'll see a lot of physical movement, you'll see a lot of games, you hear a lot of song singing. Like, it is far more There's a lot more to literacy than just sounding out words. That's why they take so many measures. All right, math. So just a quick slide to remind you that last year we changed to a new math program. So in math, we did buy a giant curriculum program, and some of the key themes are listed there. And so we're in year 2 of that implementation. And actually this morning, I was in a meeting with the elementary principals, and off agenda, I said, hey, how's Reveal Math going? I have a thing tonight. What can I tell people? And we are all in agreement that it's going to take more than a year of implementation before we're going to know how it's impacting student growth and scores. Our first little glimpse of data will probably be this spring's main through year. Because last year they were still unpacking and teachers still figuring out how to use the stuff. You know, 5th graders had a new math program that didn't look anything like the one they'd had from kindergarten through 4th grade. They had vocabulary to catch up on, right? Every math program uses different vocabulary words to describe different components of math instruction. So we're waiting. We're in heavy implementation, and we did a lot of training last year, and we're still spent a lot of professional development time on math this year too. Clicking the wrong slide. Turn the mic off instead of clicking the slide. Again, there's a list of the kinds of data we collect for math. There aren't as many measures in math as there are in literacy, but you can see when you start with little kids, you're looking at, do they recognize numbers? Can they do oral counting? Can they figure out which number is missing, right? We also start the NWEA right in kindergarten. And you see in grade 1, it's a little bit more, and then 2 through 5, it is essentially NWEA and the math main through year. And also Reveal has assessments built into each unit. So here's our math through year assessment. And Erin McGuire made these charts, and I should just say a side note, like I'd love to talk about any of this with you, but if you're really into statistics and you really want to dig deep, our curriculum director, Erin McGuire, is a data guru. So here you can see on the left versus the right, and you can see the main through year scores versus, so you can see where we are versus the state in math. So Bonnie Eagle students are green, right? Grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is on the chart, and the state is black. We are consistently just below the state average most years. Our 7th graders had quite a dip. And then on the right-hand chart, you can see that where our students are at and versus the state. So the state, for example, if you look at 8th grade, in the state, 39% or so of the students are at benchmark or exceeding the benchmark, where in 8th grade, only 28% of Bonnie Eagle students are at benchmark. And then this is just the normed NWEA, which is, again, 60% or more is where you want kids to be. And there's a definite middle school dip, but they catch up when they get to 8th, 9th grade. Actually, they did better than the state in 9th grade. Better than 60%.
Question?
Yes. So this is that same kind of chart that we looked at for literacy, where the black is the kids the year before, so you can see their growth and see how they did. So when you look at the 8th grade, for example, the black is how they did when they were in 7th grade, and then the green is how they did in 8th grade. So you can see if they improved. It's nice to be able to see if the same group of kids grow. When you just look at each year, you're looking at different kids, right? So that's what the black bar is for, just to give you a reference. So in 2023, what did those same kids do? This is the reason we bought a math program, because we know we have work to do in math. We also have hired a consultant. What's her? We have a person.
We go with Chelsea Faye, but
Yeah.
sorry, we go with Chelsea Faye, but Toby.
Yes.
I can't. So sorry.
But from Maine Math and Science
yeah.
Alliance, correct?
Chris, not Chris. I can't think of her first name.
Is that where they're from? Is it Maine Math and Science
Yes.
Alliance? Yes. MMSA, Maine Math and Science. We have consultants working with our teachers and coaching them. Thank you. I didn't need, yeah. And so we're doing a lot of work here. We've always kind of been a little better in literacy than we have been in math.
Yeah.
And then there's the science test.
Now, Lori,
Yes,
Oh, go
couple
back,
questions,
sorry.
perhaps.
okay, Lori.
Yeah.
So those dips are during COVID, correct?
On this one, it's by grade level, so no, you're looking at every line as a different grade, not a different year.
But,
If I go back,
okay, so you're not saying
She
that this
didn't
is
give me-
wait, excuse me.
Yeah.
I thought you had said something about this was the same class throughout the whole time. This is different classes all the time?
no,
It's like, I started in kindergarten and I went to ninth grade.
no, this
Okay.
is showing all 10 years right here,
Okay,
okay?
of this year.
Of
Of
23
23.
and 24.
Okay, all right.
We had a slide earlier, I had one literacy slide, but I don't have a math slide that shows
So
with the COVID piece.
in the language one, it was the same thing, correct? So it's just the years, all the different classes? Is that what it is? All right. I still don't see any getting better. I don't care if you change programs or not. I still think the basics are the best. And we're not computers. The kids are not computers. And they know how to use computers. And I understand that. But there's something wrong here. There's definitely something wrong here when MSAD6 has to have these scores for 5th and 6th graders when all the scores in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade were pretty good, and then all of a sudden they dip down when they get to middle school. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in middle school as far as the kids go, but still, they're there for learning, not to be, I don't know what the word I want to use, but in any case, they're there to learn. And if they can't learn, then there's a problem there. And I think we need to address that. And I think same thing with the language. It seems like once they get to a certain age, it's like they drop down, then they pick back up again. And I understand the hormones are raging in middle school, but gee, I still have a hard time with that. So there's a problem somewhere, and you have to learn, you have to figure it out, because these kids are not being educated. And that's my big thing right from the beginning. These kids are stupid. When they can't give you change at 18 years old, you give them a 20 and the bill is $15.50, and they don't know that they only have to give you $4.50 back unless they use a computer or a cash register. There's something wrong with that kid, because he can't count back. And I have a problem with that.
We do too. I don't think anyone is denying that at all.
We need to get the scores back up somehow. That's crazy. And I think a lot of times, I went to college. When I graduated, I graduated from Thornton, and when I graduated from Thornton, I was quite high in class. But in any case, when I learned math in school there, and then when I went to college, I didn't even know what the heck they were talking about in the class, because I did it online, and the book that they gave me had nothing to do or spoke to me the same way it did when I took the class just a few years ago. So it's like, why did they change the wording? Is that what's happening? They're changing the wording to educate the kids in a different way? I don't know if you know what I mean by that. But like the math books were totally different, like 2 and 2 equals 4, yes. But then when you go into the geometry and the calculus and stuff, which I had already taken, the wording in the book that we were using in college was totally different than what we were learning. So I would just do it my old-fashioned way and forget what they were telling me, because none of it made sense to me.
I think I understand what you're saying, and the thing about math is there are different ways to solve problems in math. You can, and historically schools taught one way, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there were kids who struggled with that way too, because their brains work differently. So what schools have tried to do better is recognizing that there's more than one way to do multiplication division. And I know parents struggle with that because it's different than what they might have been taught, but what you're really illustrating is the example of you go to college and it might be different, and if you're only taught one way and then you go somewhere where they teach you different, it's almost like you didn't even learn it. So we're trying to do our best to expose kids to more ways of doing math, so they'll have more of a chance. But there's a challenge associated with that too, right? The other thing I just want to point out, and we're definitely below the state average, but if you look at math, even at the state level, the scores in math tend to be lower across the state on this measure, right? So the math issue is not just a Bonnie Eagle problem. It's a statewide problem, and we happen to be a little bit below the state average, but everybody in the state needs to do better in math compared to reading, right? And like Lori said, we recognize that, and this is what a lot of the work is focused on at all levels, is how do we do better? How do we improve this?
So the program that you bought for math, that Reveal, is that what it's called,
Yeah.
Reveal program? I know when I was in school, we didn't have programs like that. We had a book, and if you didn't understand what the book said or how the teacher taught you, lots of times you went and saw him after school, and he would show you different ways to do things, the same way.
Still the case.
Same thing. So even though you're using the Reveal program, you are able to use different ways to teach the child how to.
The reason we picked the Reveal program is because of the number and variety of resources that teachers have at their fingertips. So instead of having to, like, before we bought the Reveal program, we said, hey, here's all the things that third graders need to learn this year, right? You know, multiplication, division, so on, and at this level, this is your curriculum. And then teachers would have to we'd give them suggestions, but they'd had to pull their own resources. And these are the good places to find resources and put things together that fit your students. And it's exhausting, especially since they're doing all that literacy stuff too, right? And so the nice thing about Reveal is it's kind of a buffet of options. We call it a buffet of options. So there's so many resources that teachers are almost overwhelmed now because the kids have a workbook and a practice book, and there's online games, and there's online problems, and there's 7 different strategies and centers, and so the kits are huge, and so now teachers have tons of stuff at their fingertips so that they can pull what their students need. But I think that means, what the focus has been for about the last year and a half has been helping teachers sort of unpack all that stuff, and then our instructional coaches and our principals are spending time helping them, like, oh, for this unit, these are the good ones you should work it on, and these are the ones that are go-tos for students who are behind, and use this one for the students who are already who want more of a challenge, right? And so just sorting through all that stuff takes a little time, and so we're really optimistic that things are going to go up.
And I can speak as a parent
Yeah.
too. I mean, so it is a book, right? And this is also developed by McGraw-Hill, and they are the be and end all higher ed publisher. So you talk about vocabulary from like high school to college, like they're making the college textbooks for calculus. I mean, it's them and Pearson. And I know prior to it, I was always seeing worksheets come home that were obviously like printed off of the internet, and they were found by the teacher. So this is basic math. This is structured. This is exactly
what you're talking about.
What we've all been asking for.
The difference, I think,
and
that
nothing more.
from when we were in school and students now is like when they get to 9th grade, I'm a high school person, so I have a 9th grade reference, but when you're in 9th grade Algebra 1, now instead of just you need to solve for X, you've got to show me you can solve for X 3 different ways. And there's different ways to get to it. And so that's the difference. And then you need to be able to explain to me how you got your answer and write that down. Like where I think when we were in school, it was all focused on just getting the answer. And now the focus is all on what's your thought process and your problem-solving process for getting to that answer, because that's the critical thinking that people need nowadays in the career field.
Right. And then Jess,
Okay,
and then we should
moving
get
on. I was gonna say, can we move
moving on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to say as a parent too, just to be very clear, our kids in this district are being educated. And I think if you look at any state, it doesn't have to be Maine, it doesn't have to be Bonnie Eagle. This dip in middle school, there's a lot, as a parent of a middle schooler, there's a lot more that goes on in middle school than this data would ever show. But I can assure you, as a parent of both an elementary kiddo and a middle schooler, our kids are being educated, and they are being educated on the basics, and they are being educated in a much broader way than we ever were. And as an electrical engineer, as my first career, my kids are doing math right now that I was not doing at that grade level, and they're being asked to show things that I have to go back and look up. So there are not basics that are being missed. These kids are being educated, but one score does not show what is going on in these schools and with these kids. There's just so much more than one set of data will ever show you.
Science assessment is fairly new. What grades? And so starting with high school, and again, this is data that was in this at the presentation of the school board, so it might be redundant for some people. You can see where the science assessment is that one that we would call the criterion referenced test, which means this is the one like where it's not based on how all the kids in the country do.
Here's the bar.
Here's
Jump
the
over
bar,
it.
jump over it, right? There's no, oh, all the other kids in the country are here, this is where we expect you to be. It's the people who made the test said, you gotta get 14 out of 18 right to be at benchmark, right? And so you can see the performance is not great. Our overall achievement level, they say, is well below in high school, and that the state is below. What that translates to, if you look at the raw scores on the right-hand side, is that, if you look at the 3 sections of the test and the raw score average, Bonnie Eagle students averaged 6, 8, or 7 out of 18 or 19 questions right, and the rest of the state average was 7 or 8 out of 18 or 19 right. So we're right there, but overall scores are low around the whole state of Maine, and this is only the 3rd year of this test.
And this is just our state, or are there other?
Just our state. No one else takes this. This is like made up just for the state of Maine.
Fine.
I have lots of opinions about the science test as a science teacher. Middle school. The nice thing about the middle school is that we still are below, but not well below. They did pretty well, and also we have like 16 students that are borderline, which means they are like 1 question away from being an at benchmark. And you can see our grade 8 versus the state's grade 8. So we're doing a little better than the state, but still considered below achievement in science in 8th grade. And then in 5th grade, again, this is the first time they take it, right? The 5th grade? Yeah, they only 5th, 8th, and 11th take this test. And you can see this where we're at. So MSAD6 grade 5 is well below, with an average with 18.1% of the students meeting the benchmark, and the state is below.
This is a good time to maybe add
1
that.
point difference in the score. I guess I want to make sure too, you had to see that, right? The state average is 34, Bonnie Eagle got 33.
If you look at how many instructional minutes are spent teaching science in elementary school compared to teaching math and reading, trying to improve in those 2 major areas, in the last few years, we've definitely moved away from being, any teacher would tell you, we have not spent time on science because we focus so much on the other areas. So this result does not surprise me. And it also will relate to a request you'll see later, or, well, I guess it won't be here, but we have plans for how we can address this gap, because there's frankly a gap in science, right?
I think, if you're looking for a silver lining in the science, because we are still below the state achievement level, you can see that even though we're still below, we did improve by 3.5%, which means we got 26 more students over the bar from last year to this year.
Question from Taylor?
Yeah, just a quick question on the prior slide. So we're saying that was the total number of questions asked was 18,
Oh, yeah, it's
19.
wicked short. It's
Science was never my strong suit, but it seems like it's a pretty broad category for 20 questions. But I just wanted to make sure I had that right.
I finished taking biology, but there were only 2 biology questions on the whole test, right?
Right,
Like, yeah.
right, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
get me
you.
going. Yeah. There's some notes there that that Erin put on here, just some things about data in general. And she did a lot of digging. Like I said, she did a lot of statistical comparison and shared that with the board. I'm not going to spend time on it tonight, so I'm going to kind of gloss over. But the idea being that basically across the country, growth is behind from where it was before the pandemic. And we are doing a better job at catching up than a lot of other places in the country nationally. The average student is behind 4 months of instruction from where they used to be. So that's just a national trend. And also another piece that's worth looking at is we're talking all about this NWEA and the Maine 3-year assessment. That has gone back to RFP for bid twice this year, and they still have not decided what the test is going to be.
That would be a request for proposal,
Sorry, thank you.
right? So
Request for
meaning,
proposal.
they want somebody to tell them how to do it differently.
So in
So
other
we
words,
can't compare the numbers.
they haven't signed a contract to continue with MAP and NWEA for their state assessment, is because they're not happy with the way it's going. So, and they've gone back out to bid again for a third. This will be the 2nd time this year, and they still haven't settled on what they're going to use in 2026. so. What's that? Right, they've changed the test on us constantly. We've never been able to get like 5 years with the same test. Never. Okay, just really quickly, what do we do when kids aren't meeting? Because you can see we have kids who aren't meeting. We use MTSS, which I talked about last year, and I'll just go quick. Multi-tiered systems of support is the vernacular that teachers use, and we look at students. It looks at the whole child, so they look at their math and reading test scores, but they also look at how they're doing with meeting main guiding principles, things like effective communicator. They also look at things like how are they doing emotionally and behaviorally and attendance and chronic absenteeism and so on. And then we put together tiers or levels of intervention. So what are the interventions we're doing with all kids? Because all kids need more work on whatever. And then we have tier 2 level things, which are when kids get pulled out for a little bit. Someone gives them a little extra help. They're in a particular group getting particular instruction during the day for an extra 20 minutes. Those kids who are behind in a particular area. And then tier 3 is really like for a small population of students who really need intensive supports. Those might be intensive behavioral supports. You hear about behavior classrooms or Compass programs. They might be intensive instructional supports. They might be even, referral eventually to special ed services. So, and all the way up to outplacements in special programming that are super expensive, right? So just wanted to throw that out there so you understood a lot of time is spent on MTSS. One thing that has been really awesome is that we've been able to add over the last 2 years to almost every building the BAR program, which is Building Assets Reducing Risks. The state endorsed this program and footed the bill for any school district that wanted to jump on in the last 2 years. And so in every building, we're hoping, every building right now except Buxton Center is doing a little bit different, and the high school is hoping to add on next year, it's been going through coaching and training and setting up the BAR model. The BAR model uses a variety of meetings. It's really a teacher-centered, it's how we sit, so when teachers sit down and have meetings about kids, it's to make sure they're really looking at data. It's those data meetings, it's those MTSS meetings. It's a model for doing that work. And it also includes some student time and connect, which is time where students, activities you do in class to help build teams and help build social skills, and also identifying what resources. It's an asset-based conversation model. So instead of sitting around the table every week talking about the same 5 kids in the team who are doing terrible, who are falling apart, and then just spinning, right? And, what are we going to do about Johnny? What are we going to do about Johnny, right? Instead, it's an asset-based model where you actually have a system in place to make sure you're talking about every kid and that you're focusing on their strengths and then what supports they need. So just another, really molds nicely into the MTSS model. Anyway, high school stuff. I'm talking about all this test scores. This is the biggest celebration we've had this year. Our graduation rate jumped up significantly from 84 and change to almost 88% in 1 year. Our graduation rate went up so much this past year that the DOE, Dan Chuda actually called us, the deputy commissioner, and said, are your scores right, or is this an error?
Yes, sir, they are right.
They are
Double,
right.
triple checks by our data services coordinator.
That's right.
It is correct.
We are super proud of this, and I think this speaks a lot to all the work we've done over the last few years in supporting those students who are at high risk. We have a strong, thriving alternative ed program. We added a differentiated diploma for students who have had extreme hardship. So instead of needing, because 24 credits, we have like one of the highest credit requirements in the state. Most high schools don't have a 24 credit requirement. And so if we have such a high bar to get to a diploma, so if you were hospitalized for a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue, or you were homeless for 2 years, sometimes 24 credits isn't a bar you can get over. And so we have a differentiated program. We've also, the state has also really revived their state diploma program, and we think those two things have are probably key pieces in this difference. I think BAR, MTSS, all of those pieces that we've added 4 or 5 social workers over the last 5 since the pandemic, right? Like those are the things that are getting the support STEM needs so kids don't drop out. Anyway, yeah. graduation rate, woo-hoo.
And I think this speaks to Jess's point about how, when we look at one data point for any group of kids, it only tells you so much. This is a more holistic look. Like, I think everybody understands graduation rate, right? And this is a measure that I think definitely is worth hanging our hat on.
I also throw in every year, if you want a list of all the places where the class of 2024 went to college, it's up there. Again, higher rate of college-bound students than we usually have. We lived in the 70s forever. So this is exciting news. I would say the free community college that the state is providing is a game changer in two ways, a good way and maybe a not so good way if some people see it. We have more students going to college because it's free, and we live in Maine, and the fact of the matter is Maine's a practical bunch of people, and cost is a giant factor. Most of our students stay in Maine and go to school in Maine. We are not like other states where kids go to all the fancy high-end places. The vast majority of our students go to Maine schools because it's good value for the dollar, right? And we're a practical bunch of people. And and so making the community colleges free for graduates has been huge. We also have a little bit increase. Usually we're more like nationally only 1% of the U.S. population is in the military. We sent 2% into the military this year, so that's a stat to look at. But you can see those kids who do go to four-year colleges and out of state, we matriculate all over the place. There's Ivy Leagues, there's high ends, there's elite schools there. But we are the largest sending school to Southern Maine Community College. Yeah, so yeah. 46% of those, out of those ones that went to college, 46% are going to a four-year school, 29% two-year school, and we send more students to SMCC than any other high school in Maine.
And thank you for listing UNE twice on that list, but Nancy Lou has a question.
Did you want me to go back? Sorry. Yes.
How many credits did you say they take to graduate?
24.
24? What are other states doing?
Every town, every district decides their own graduation requirements. So, I don't know. So off the top of, so districts around us might have 22, 21, 24. It's the gamut. But 24 is, I don't know of anybody who does more than 24.
Is there a accreditation standard?
There is no accreditation standard. Accreditation is focused on like what offerings you have for students, not so much seat time and credits. The state of Maine requires 11 credits for a hardship state diploma. If you want to put it in perspective.
Peter?
Yeah, I thought the state of Maine had a 16 or an 18 credit minimum.
Nope, not anymore. They actually don't even have a phys ed requirement anymore. Yeah,
Phys
like,
ed requirement.
yeah,
Okay.
So it's 4 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of science, 3 years of social studies, must have U.S. history and personal finance. Full credit of art.
Want to thank you, 'cause I was one that, amongst several that wanted some detailed information. I read all of these reports ahead of time and looked at it, and your explanations helped, but I've been terribly disappointed in the fact that we appear to be backing up in some places, and you talk about changing the math program again, and I can see the dip over the time period here, and then coming back. We keep changing programs, and again, the numbers are lower because we started a new program. Next year it's going to be better. We're still, if you go from COVID on, we were great on 2024 graduation at that number. It's fantastic. I think it's great. But we were consistently in the 5± % below the state average, and everybody in the state went through the same thing our students went through, yet we dropped much. 5 percentage points to me is a lot in our graduation as compared to the state. We keep throwing money at it, but I don't see that we're really making, just because we're a few points below the state average, doesn't do anything for me. we want the best for the kids, and I want them to excel and people know that SAD6 is the right district to be in, and because of the education is so good. But these numbers, it just, I mean, it's mediocre as far as I'm concerned. And then, you know, I hear people say we're spending so much money on education, and we are, but what do we get for it? And I am somewhat disappointed. Glad about the graduation for 2024, but I was hoping to see better than this for the money that we're spending and all the programs we put in and all the extra guidance and those types of things. And I understand with COVID screwed up everything. I mean, the kids are a mess. Remote learning was the worst thing that ever came about. Some adapted well to it, others no. And it's going to take us a decade to recoup from the effects of that psychologically as well as, you know, educational wise. But again, I'm just one person, but I just need to say that I was somewhat disappointed that our numbers were not higher than they are. Thank you.
Isabel, and then.
Well, a couple of things from my historical perspective. When I was in grammar school here, there was, I think reading was the SRA program, which was a color-coded thing. And if you were, depending on where you were in that program, if you weren't, the kids who were not proficient at reading ended up in one line on one side of the classroom, and that was a stigma. And that was hard to overcome. And it was hard for one teacher with 35 kids in a class to address those things. I have two questions, or another comment. We are now providing, as a school system, so many more necessary services because of where we are in society, because of all the issues, and we also have a huge district. And I guess my question would be, size-wise, with the numbers that we are getting, the results we're getting, because I agree with Peter. When I read through this initially, I was like, I was kind of bummed. The size of the district and the number of students over a big area that we are trying to provide numerous services besides just reading, writing, arithmetic, to help them succeed. And does that, how big a factor does that, is that in the overall picture? And how, because we have higher graduation requirements, how do we compare to the more successful schools? The Cape Elizabeths, the Falmouths, the Cumberlands, and Greeley, I guess. I think those are all factors that, and I guess I'm not sure how much all of these different factors go into the final result that we have.
Right. Couple thoughts, if I could, going back to Peter's thoughts. Obviously, we all want to do better. This slide I just want to bring you back to, and this is the one that Pat was mentioning. This is the same group of kids, right, over time, where you could see where the same district had them at almost 90% proficiency in reading, and then the world ended. And then we've made our steady climb out of the crater from 2020. And I think if we could put this slide up for every year of kids, you would see more hope. When you look at the aggregate, it's harder to see. What's also embedded in that data is 30% of our population is identified as special ed. Let's see about Greeley? No. Let's check Falmouth? No. Let's check Yarmouth? No. We report every single kid on these scores. There is no hiding anyone. If someone opts out, it's not really an opt-out, it's a black mark on us because the parent can say no, we still have to report it as no test to the state, we get penalized. It's not like a free pass. And they do that so people can't hide their scores. So we have people that move into our community because they know how thorough our special ed services are, and that affects our scores. The other thing that since I began in this district in 2002, it's very clear to me statistically, we influence the average at a higher rate than most districts because we are such a statistical contributor, right? It's hard to be above the average when you are a larger population within the average, whereas a small group can float within that average. I don't want to get too deep into the math, right? But I think most of you kind of get what I'm saying. So it's going to be harder for Bonnie Eagle to exceed the state average no matter what we do. I'm not happy with what we see there, but this slide is what gives me hope, right? And I think if we put slides like this up in the next 3 years in math, this is what I would expect to see. Once our teachers are more proficient, the kids are used to it, and I get the point, Peter, you made about switching programs. The problem is we didn't really have a program before, and it was really hard. It was really a teacher burnout question as much as it was a curriculum question because we had teachers doing all this individualizing in literacy and in math, and they had no life. And then some of them were leaving to go make more money and have a box curriculum to have a better balance of life. And I think this math program has made it easier for teachers to be proficient and feel confident, right? So I really hope to see things continue to improve, and nobody's happy with the scores being so off, especially, in math.
So my last slide. One of the things that Clay just mentioned that we already saw a much better summer for hiring, and we have far fewer open positions with the new contract. So the contract support has been gigantic, and it is really saving us. But just so you have a clear picture, 1 in 5 of our teachers has less than 3 years of teaching experience. They are green. They need a lot of coaching and support, and that costs money. And also, they're not necessarily going to perform always as high as someone with 10 years of experience. And so that's an important statistic. It's better than last year because I think it was 21 last year. So we're finally creeping back down below 20%. But still, almost 1 in 5 of our teachers have less than 3 years of experience in the field, not just with us. Chronic absenteeism has improving, but absenteeism is a big issue. A quarter of our students miss more than 10% of the year. That is something that absolutely has a giant impact on instruction and scores. If you're not in school, you don't learn. And we put a lot of energy and effort into changing that tide and trying to drive home the message that. But again, that's another one of those pandemic rebound things. We told people for 2 years, if your kid had a sniffle, make sure they stay home, right? And now we're fighting a battle. We fight a battle with attendance. And then also our population is changing, and the urban spread is coming our way, and our demographics in the state are changing. And just in 1 year, we've nearly doubled the number of students that are learning English, that are getting English language services. And so we went from 23 last spring to 39 this fall. And I imagine that number will just continue to exponentially grow. So those are just my last 3 facts.
I'm going to table questions for now because we do have a whole other topic to cover, but if we do have time at the end, absolutely, we can recover anything we've talked about. Over
Thank
to
you, guys. Sorry, I
Mr.
knew it was going to be
Gleason.
long. All right.
I got your email there.
I know, I'm trying. Yeah.
Don't read Lori's email.
Don't read
Don't read
Lori's
it.
email.
Don't look. I'm not going to project, but you have a packet entitled School Construction Update BAC January 23rd, 2025. So we'll just kind of go through that. I just sort of assembled some notes and interesting information. I thought it was interesting. Some of this is right from, I didn't properly cite it, and I apologize in advance, but a lot of this is right from the DOE website or through communications that I've had. So the program that we're talking about is the Major Capital School Construction Program, right? That's the program that the state runs, and periodically they open up this program and accept applications and then close it and then do this evaluation and then decide, rank order and decide which schools to fund. So the latest rating cycle is open for 24-25. It opened on August 30th. We had done a lot of work last year to prepare, and we submitted seven applications, because we didn't submit for Buxton. So every school except Buxton. I found out, I feel pretty solid that on this number, there are 98 applications. I had thought it was going to be closer to 150 or 200. So if you do the math on that, right, 7 out of 100 is 7%. So we're more than 7% of all the applications is Bonnie Eagle. So I'm just going to say, whatever happens, we have a volume chance, right? A 7 out of 100 chance is better than 1 out of 100, right? Take it. I'll take it.
Our tickets in
Right?
the bucket.
Yep. The site visits were scheduled for September statewide. Ours are in February. My deduction tells me we're near the end. In an interview, right, they say be at the beginning or the end, don't be in the middle. I'm going to take that as a positive sign too. Okay, you take it how you want. I'm taking that as positive. We're going to spin this thing. They didn't say when they're going to be done with these site visits. They say that their rating process will be done by June, and the priority list will be in place by the end of, I'm assuming this means calendar year 2025. So as far as when are we going to know, I don't know if we'll know by June. I had hoped we'd know sooner. I don't think we're going to know a lot sooner. We'll see. As I mentioned, the site visits consist of an hour meeting followed by a 2-hour tour of the building. We have been preparing our administrators for these site visits. And I'll be fully transparent. And normally when they do a tour of their building, they're going to say, look at this great thing, look at this great thing, and close the door with the bad stuff. And I've said to the principals, this is the opposite. This is where you don't pick up for company. You let all the gross things hang out. You show, there's a room in Edna Libby that's locked from kids, but it has no floor. It's the room with no floor. I said to Sue Sidnor, make sure you show them the room with no floor. I really wish they could have been at the high school a couple weeks ago when the ceiling ties were all out, and Carl Inglesby was showing me the wiring and just how it has been done over the years, and how the problem that day was like a connector that should have been replaced 15 years ago. And it's amazing it made it this far, and there's so many more of them in the ceiling up there that he now knows to work on replacing. So we're going to show them all the ugly stuff in the schools. This is not a put your best foot forward kind of thing.
Yeah, just for full disclosure, Eric and I at after the last meeting, in full view of Clay, and I apologize to Lori and Dawn on this. Eric and I implored our facilities director, please don't replace the tarps right before these guys come.
Right.
Don't,
find
this
a
is
few
one
more
of the
tarps.
one time
Right.
I don't want to hear that we like covered something up. Sorry.
Posters down,
Yeah.
covering holes.
Yes, please take all the posters down that are covering like open gaps in electrical housing. Put them right back so that the kids aren't at risk, but please, this is the one time we can't cover up the fact that we are in desperate need of funding. And the real reason I interceded is the last time this process happened was 2017, 2018. We have not scored higher than number 30 on the list in the last.
And in fact, Todd, I don't think we've applied in years. Since Buxton, maybe even, I don't think we've applied. And that's been a disappointment for me, because if you don't ask, you can't even be told no, right? So even if it is no, and our 7 in 100 chance, falls through, at least we tried, right? These are the dates of the visits. So February 11th, the high school, middle school, the 12th, the 3 Standish schools, and then the 13th, HB and Hollis. Yep, and there's 7. Okay, I did my math right. So I plan to be at all of those. Carl will be at all of those. I think Dawn's going to go to all of those. The principal will be there. I think it's a visiting team of 4. My understanding is it's some members of the team are like school people, like retired superintendents or whatever. There's someone from the construction team at the state, sorry. So they'll be, and I think it's the same people visiting everywhere, and that is good, because I wouldn't love it if they had different teams, because then you get a favorite, right? Everyone will perceive things differently. So that was good. The next part is a straight up copy and paste, and I apologize if there's some errors in there. This is the rating criteria that they sent to us. And I was somewhat encouraged looking at this too, because it isn't just about having a crowded school. That's one factor, is if you don't have enough space for your kids. But if, there's a lot here, but if you look through it, right, some of the criteria are the boiler rooms, the conditions of the electrical system, storage, environmental hazards, traffic and circulation, which is a huge problem at the high school and at Edna Libby, sewer systems. There's so many factors that are not just overcrowding. And I look at this and think, yes, there could be a bunch of schools that are worse, but we're not going to score great on a lot of these things. Okay? Crowding is not necessarily one that we'll score high on, because we're not particularly crowded, but we are running out of space, which I know is a little bit of a contradiction, but we just have so much more that we're trying to offer to kids. I didn't even get on that rant during the data presentation about how much more schools are expected to do now than they were 15, 20, 25 years ago. 25 years ago, you came and you'd learned, and parents took care of most everything else, and now schools are expected to do pretty much everything. I was at an appointment at a car place, not in the district, and the gentleman didn't know me, or he didn't think he did. Turns out he was a former student, actually. And he's like, these days off from school. It was the holiday on Monday. And he's like, these schools leave parents in a hard spot when they don't have childcare for our kids. It's a holiday. It's not a snow day. It's a holiday, man. And it's not a new holiday. And then sheepishly, when he asked what I did for work, I'm like, I'm the superintendent. Sorry. So this, I think if you want to look through this on your own time, it's just interesting. And this is what the team will, my understanding is this is what those visiting teams will be going around scoring all our schools on. And then, the magic question is, what happens if one of our schools scores high enough? And then it becomes the conversation around how do we resolve that? And of course, we have this big, sort of one Bonnie Eagle concept, but that isn't a final done deal. There's so much more that would need to be done, and the state might even say, we'll do something, but we aren't doing that, right? So we might have to go back and look at what our options are and how to best use this opportunity if we get it. Then I also included a Q&A that I came across, and some of it's not stuff that would interest you, but I thought there was a couple of these that you might find interesting. Talking about multiple applications, multiple buildings on an application, can that be done in one? The answer is no. Well, we knew that. That's why we submitted 7. I don't think there's going to be too many districts that have submitted 7, just saying. I know Oxford Hills, I feel pretty sure I heard that superintendent say they did a couple, they didn't do 7. And they're very much like us in their district makeup, with some of the same challenges that we have. So anyway, there's a lot of information on here if you want to review that too. Another piece that I didn't have on the handout that I forgot to include, but there is also a commission that has been formed by the governor to study school construction funding, the process, because I think everybody agrees the process is antiquated. It doesn't work. There isn't enough funding for the program. It's not really particularly helpful when you fund a school a year, when there are just hundreds of schools in the state that need something. The other thing that's been a topic of conversation is it fair for any project to be funded at 100%, whether you're Cape Elizabeth or Bonnie Eagle, right? And even Cape Elizabeth has said, we don't need it 100%. If we could have just had $10 million or $5 million out of some seed money, we might have got our project locally funded with the rest, right? And then a small district in what they can afford versus a large district, but the large district has a greater magnitude of problems, right? So they're studying all of that. Apparently Massachusetts has a model where they have a separate commission that oversees this. They have a tax. Whether I don't know if it's a hotel tax, but they have a tax they collect, and they pay cash for their projects. When you finance a project, right, you're paying half the cost in interest, so a building's costing the same as 2 when the project's said and done. So if you could pay for it up front, you could do twice as many, right? So all of those conversations are being had. I think you'll find us change. This will be the last time I think the rating cycle will look like this, whatever happens with us. And don't be sad if this doesn't get us where we need to be, because there may be different opportunities moving forward, because the whole system is being looked at and it's long overdue. So I would be happy to take questions about any of that, if you have any, or want me to try to predict the future. I'm really good or really bad at that, depending on who you ask on snow days.
Is there anything that the community can do to help this process?
I would just ask, not directly, just to be open-minded. I know some people didn't like come to some of the meetings we had, and some people are like, oh, they want to close our community schools. I don't want to do anything. Like, all I want is I want our kids to have a 21st century experience and not have to like worry about the heat going out and the boiler not working and the school flooding, right? I don't want to close community schools, but I also don't want to pit the community against each other, like what we've gone through in the past, where one community gets something and the rest of the towns get nothing, and then this creates this animosity. So being open-minded and following along with the process, and when we have the opportunity to engage people, turn out and be engaged and just hear the messaging, listen, and give honest input on what's being proposed if we get to that point. And if we don't get this state-funded project, we've got to do something. And I'm open to ideas because I don't know what the answer is, but it's not going to cost nothing, right? We have schools that need significant work, and Carl has done a great job kind of getting up to speed and looking at boilers and roofs and mechanical systems and accessibility issues, and we know this. We've heard this last year. Adam talked about this in the past, so those things haven't gone away.
Yeah.
So how do we fairly tackle some of those things so our schools are at least minimally safe and acceptable?
Great. Any questions involving this topic? Izzy, am I covering this?
Is the issue of accreditation, would that be affected by, or how could it be affected by the condition of our buildings?
I don't know that our high school is in such like disrepair that would be a factor, because we did invest some resources into it through the science labs, and that was an issue, right? I mean, we didn't have facilities that were up to snuff for science. There are limitations, but I don't know that it's to that level.
No, and so the last time around, we had which was like about 7, 8 years ago now, so we still have a couple of years, but we had a priority list of things, and honestly, the science labs was a big one. There were we got a new boiler system at the high school. So we made some improvements and knocked like half the things off the priority list from the accreditation report. So at our we had to submit a 5-year update report. We were looking pretty good. So it won't come around again for 2 or 3 more years. But yeah, it's one of one of like 8 areas they look at. So it's not the end all be all.
And when being on the school board at the time for the accreditation, understand that one of the issues like the portables, there were areas that we have gotten, Peter and some of the original BAC members remember the days where, we had a large inventory of portable buildings and housed students in there, and the administration and the facility staff have done a Herculean amount of tasks to remove students from such environments, which helps with our accreditation, but also from in a sense, as Clay mentioned, when you go through the buildings and the, let's say, volume of students in a specific building, that does, in a sense, increase our, let's say, congestion and some of the other things. Our hope is I would always understand the fact that realize this is a multi-year process. It's always going to be one of those things. And our original goal is in the hopes that in no uncertain terms, the state will, let's say, support our efforts. At the same time, it doesn't always cover every one of our needs because, as Clay said, we have 7 applications. There's very little probability we're going to get 7, in the top 10 to get funded.
I'll just add that I think I've said this before. We do hear that they favor consolidation. They will not pick up projects for small schools. So that was all part of the thought process in building the concept that we would present if given the chance, right? How does it look more attractive to take on the project? I mean, I've heard, I don't know this for a fact, but I've heard that Portland is talking about their application involves consolidating their 3 high schools. That's a pretty big, expensive project, way bigger and more expensive than what we're proposing, as big of a dollar value as was on our project. So I think it's a time to not be afraid and to go big or go home, frankly, so.
Any other questions for the evening?
So what schools are not on the application?
BCS.
Yeah, the only one that we didn't submit for was Buxton Center, because it's 13 or 14 or 15 years old. And there are some things, but one of the other things that came up is continuing to devote, money for capital improvements to a new building, because you get something new, and then if you don't take care of it, it doesn't take long before it's not good anymore. And we're not that we haven't taken care of Buxton, but we're starting to see signs of age, and if we don't keep up with it, it's not gonna stay newer.
Sorry, and we won't go into the ED 279 too deeply, but understand that one of the issues we have is, and it's listed in the last couple ED 279s, is we haven't had a lot of debt because we haven't been funding those things, which means that the state takes money away from us. They'd give us more money for what we call the 20-year bonds. So when they looked at the bonds we have, if you look back at some of the ED 279s a couple of years ago, is they've reduced the amount of money we have because we're not carrying a lot of debt because we haven't bonded things. The high school bond and BCES bond are coming off our ledgers in a few years, and the state's only going to reduce our funding more. But let's not dive down the ED 279 well too well.
It's good to have a little debt. It's good to have debt.
Yeah, for one time. All right, just to wrap up the evening, so our next meeting will be on February 13th, covering the baseline budget and non-labor budget details. Definitely, hopefully we can get that packet out at least a week prior to, because that is kind of a beefy set of data. So when that does come out, definitely start looking over it. That being said, if you do have questions, don't feel like you have to understand everything prior to the meetings. We will be covering it in detail then. Dawn, you want to say something?
Yep. We're going to be putting together some binders actually for everybody. So we'll email the information out, but we're hoping to have the binders ready the Friday before the meeting.
Great.
So if people want to come in and pick them up, we'll send out an email and let you know they're ready.
Perfect.
There was also a sheet in your packet about PFAS, or I'm sorry, a separate sheet. It was not in the packet. And Peter had given me a call this week and let me know about a couple articles that were in the paper. So I just wanted to give everybody an update about what's happened with PFAS in our district and how we've handled it. We had testing back in July and August of 2022, which showed elevated levels of PFAS. We immediately checked with the state, the Maine Drinking Water Program, and followed their recommendations. We set up water coolers at the school that had levels greater than 20 parts per trillion. We posted do not drink, hand washing only signs in those schools. And at the same time, we applied to the drinking water program, and we were awarded a grant of $1,010,000. We used that money to install PFAS treatment systems at Frank Jewett, Hollis Elementary, Bonnie Eagle High School, and Bonnie Eagle Middle School in the summer of 2023. This made the water drinkable in those schools. Then we learned that the acceptable level was going to be dropped from 70 parts per trillion to 4 parts per trillion. So we, in 2024, we added the PFAS treatment system to Buxton Center Elementary School. And then we also dug 2 new wells, one at the middle school and one at the high school. And this summer, we're going to work to connect the middle school well to the middle school. And then after that, we're going to have to connect the high school well to the high school. To date, we've spent about $649,000
From the million grant.
from the million grant. And the rest of that will be used to connect those wells that were dug, so.
And I just wanted to recognize, Adam Thibodeau did a lot of work on this and was very proactive. And if you look around at what's happening, I think it was great work to get out in front of this and get this done so that when you see these articles, it's affecting homeowners, it's affecting a lot of places, but it's not affecting any of our schools because we've already been there and done that. So.
Awesome. All right. public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Motion to adjourn. Awesome. All those in favor? Aye, aye. Anyone wants to stay? No one? All right. Thank you.